Imagine the entire Middle Ages as one endless, sweaty gym session with zero showers, knights dragging their unwashed armor like rusty barbells, and peasants leaving a funk trail that could be tracked like ancient breadcrumbs. That's the stereotype, right? Medieval folks as walking dirt magnets, half afraid of water, united in an aromatic alliance until some bold Victorian hero rediscovered soap. Let's toss that stinky myth into the nearest bubbling cauldron of bathwater. Medieval bathhouses were very much a thing, long before lush boutiques or bath bombs made hygiene hip. Bathing was basically the social sport of the day. People didn't just scrub down, they snacked, gossiped, and did everything short of posing for a clean and thriving selfie. Technology lagged behind scrubbing, unfortunately. Sure, religious leaders occasionally grumbled about too much bathing, not because they feared folks would get too virtuous from spotless skin, but because, well, they worried cleanliness might make people a tad too relaxed. Sin, not sinus, was their concern. When plagues struck or the plumbing, red rivers and wells, got sketchy, the bubble baths paused. But baths never quite disappeared from the scene. Manuscripts reveal soap recipes, hygiene guides, and household tips, proof that even peasants tried to outclean your average college dorm. If medieval people truly ignored bathing, chainmail would have come equipped with built-in air fresheners, and kings would have ruled by olfactory domination alone. Public bathhouses, with their steam, snacks, and scandals, were the medieval equivalent of today's gym sauna Instagram trifecta. So, no, bathing was not invented in 1948 with the modern shower. Across all classes, the Middle Ages smelled better than their reputation suggests. Beyond misconceptions about hygiene, it's also important to look at what medieval peasants actually ate. When medieval peasants come up, the word gruel gets bandied about more than a baker's rolling pin. Popular imagination paints them as subsisting on endless vats of sorrowful, watery porridge, as if every medieval banquet was secretly oatmeal appreciation night. But before you start sending them modern breakfast recipes, let's torch this myth. Sure, peasants get typecast as gruel enthusiasts, but their menu wasn't penned by the world's most melancholic chef. Medieval cookbooks didn't simply say, Step 1, add water. Step 2, stir in despair. In reality, peasant tables featured hearty slices of bread, think rustic sourdough, not supermarket fluff, alongside a parade of vegetables, beans, onions, cabbage, and enough kale to make a modern fitness influencer weep with envy. With all that kale, maybe peasants were the original green smoothie pioneers. Hold the blender, please. Was gruel on the menu? Sure, but more as a last resort or quick breakfast before heading to the fields, not the centerpiece of every meal. And let's not forget the seasonal perks. Summer brought cheeky berries and fruits, while festivals could feature luxurious roast chicken or pork. No need to Instagram, just eat and enjoy. Bonus round. Peasants brewed their own weak ale, not just for fun, well, maybe a little, but because it was safer than water. So next time you picture a medieval peasant eating, don't assume they're spooning misery. Their table was way more vibrant than you think. Just don't expect avocado toast. While gruel might seem monotonous and dull, dietary habits impacted more than just nutrition. They also influenced dental health. Imagine every medieval peasant grinning with jack-o'-lantern gaps and keeling over before 35. right? If pop culture had its way, pre Renaissance Europe was just a geriatric parade of snaggled toothed seniors wobbling around at an age when today's millennials are still debating whether to buy air fryers. But let's brush up on the real facts. Medieval dental hygiene wasn't exactly an influencer's dream of dazzling smiles. Nobody was snagging best smile on your old Instagram. Still, peasants weren't dropping teeth like confetti at a carnival every time they sneezed. Sure, sharing blacksmith's communal beer mugs was a rookie dental care mistake. Medieval pro tip: don't swap ale cups. But sugar was scarce, and without a candy buffet, rampant tooth decay wasn't the epidemic it is today. And that classic, no one lived past 30 myth, total drama. The average life expectancy number was dragged down by sky high infant mortality. Babies really had it rough. Survive teething and dodge smallpox, and you were likely to rack up a few good decades. Many made it into their 50s or 60s, proving that hitting 30 didn't mean instantly turning into a hunchback with 3 teeth and a flair for dramatic death scenes. Archaeological digs reveal plenty of medieval adults who kept most of their teeth. Okay, sometimes crooked, but this was before extremes of dentistry hit the airwaves. When early tooth loss or wrinkles did appear, it usually meant malnutrition or a rare illness, not some medieval default setting. In short, the medieval mouth wasn't pristine, but it also wasn't a horror show. So before you pity your 14th century ancestor, remember their diet was basically paleo, and their smiles, though imperfect, weren't auditioning for Halloween. Poor dental care paints a grim picture, much like the common beliefs about the conditions of medieval homes. If you think your apartment has bad insulation, try living in a medieval manor where a drafty castle feels like a luxury suite and your most talkative roommate might just be a cow. Before you conjure images of the entire Middle Ages as one giant muddy petting zoo, let's stomp out that myth. Sure, a medieval peasant's home wasn't a penthouse, but it wasn't a 24/7 barnyard either. The livestock in the living room setup wasn't standard, except maybe on those frosty nights when the local cow doubled as a surprisingly effective, if rather unconventional, heated blanket. Organic warmth was trending long before down comforters showed up. So, what did a typical medieval pad look like? Imagine a timber framed cottage topped with a proud thatched roof, and we mean thatched, not patched, at least on a good day. Most had 1 or 2 rooms max, with an open floor plan in the most literal sense. Your only open space meant chickens strutted freely beneath the one table you owned. Sometimes humans bunked with animals, but this wasn't a design choice. It was more about warding off frostbite and adding a layer of security. Forget video doorbells. Your watchdog was literally a dog, probably snoozing on your toes. Progress came, just at a pace reminiscent of a tortoise napping. Chimneys finally made their debut, banishing smoke that once turned homes into permanent fog machines. Rudimentary glass windows, and eventually separate byres, gave animals their own quarters. The wealthy got to live in giant drafty halls that felt like refrigerators dressed with tapestries. Those wall hangings, medieval insulation, if zero R value, and a flair for drama counts. Mood lighting meant candles and rush lights, because darkness was gratis. Centuries later, cleanliness and privacy took giant leaps forward, luckily turning personal space into something more than a pleas for the cows to back off. The supposed squalor of medieval houses reflects wider assumptions about education and literacy during the era. Picture medieval towns, peasants squinting at cryptic scribbles, assuming every book is either a spell tome or, at best, instructions for brewing stronger ale. In our Netflix fueled daydreams, literacy is the secret handshake of monks and nobles. The rest are just tourists lost in a cathedral, decoding stone carved hieroglyphics. But let's slay this literacy dragon. The classic myth tells us only cloistered monks or powdered nobles could read, while the masses couldn't tell an O from an omelet. Yet, if monks were the sole readers, who kept catching the town crier's spelling blunders? Someone had to spot those public announcements. Here's the ink stained truth. Most peasants weren't swapping letters across kingdoms, but some townsfolk and merchants knew their ABCs, and sometimes a bit more. Churches, champions of both holy scriptures and slightly less holy paperwork, occasionally doubled as literacy boot camps. Sunday school wasn't just about choir practice, it was also crash course in not getting hoodwinked at the market. Guilds and businesses needed literate folks for contracts, inventories, and presumably deciphering the brewer's handwriting. Those squiggly symbols, they often meant pay up, not abracadabra. While peasants might have bungled Latin prayers, they could definitely read the bar tab. Priorities, right? And let's not forget Europe's Jewish and Islamic communities, literacy hubs passing the torch through generations. Noble and merchant women, too, sometimes unlocked the mysterious world of letters, and dare I say, the very first secret shopping lists. So, yes, medieval literacy was rare, but the masses weren't total strangers to written words. Maybe not everyone could debate Plato, but enough market goers argued over bread prices. The original book club, really. Next time you picture medieval life, add a few more readers and a couple less spell books. The plot thickens. Limited access to education for most parallels the restricted roles that women were believed to have in medieval society. Picture the average medieval woman, not a damsel marooned in a tower, sighing for a prince and an ancient version of Uber Eats. The popular image serves up helpless sighs and flowing hair, forever doomed to embroidery and wistful stares from a drafty window. Her biggest daily dilemma? Choosing which gown to gaze dramatically in, while her noble steed remained strictly imaginary. Here's the myth in all its satin and suffering. Medieval women were fragile princesses, eternally locked away by grumpy guardians, wicked stepmothers, and an uncanny shortage of personal agency. Every castle apparently came with a maiden storage tower, plus a lifetime subscription to 13th century boredom monthly. But why do we picture these ladies as passive props, more window dressing than power players? Here's the reality. Pointy shoes and all, medieval women were often steely multitaskers. They ran households, managed estates, and when duty called, ruled kingdoms. Peasant women worked alongside men in fields, hustled in markets, and spun up artisan crafts faster than you can say, "Ye old Etsy." If all noblewomen had been holed up in towers, castles would have needed a lot more bathrooms. Elite figures like Eleanor of Aquitaine played politics like grandmasters, while Joan of Arc led armies instead of just waving from parade floats. Meanwhile, nuns were the real MVPs, running schools, copying manuscripts, and sometimes outranking male clergy. And while legal rights for women wobbled by time and place, they generally had far more wiggle room than fairy tales let on. So next time you picture medieval damsels, think less Rapunzel, more Renaissance multitasker, with perhaps a grain silo instead of a tower. After all, most towers stored grain anyway, and grain, unlike princesses, never complains about drafty windows. The narrative of women's imprisonment ties into another enduring myth that medieval life was dominated by constant warfare. Imagine waking up every morning in medieval Europe, instantly dodging arrows on your way to milk the cow. Welcome to your not so average Tuesday. Or at least, that's the legend Hollywood and Renaissance fairs love to sell. The myth? Every medieval villager doubled as a part time warrior, swinging swords before breakfast and warding off armored knights, or for extra flair, the occasional dragon, breakfast not included. In this epic reenactment, peasants scramble through muddy yards, brandishing makeshift spears as chickens flee flaming hordes. The local dragon slaying guild meets more often than the village council, and market trips are less about buying cabbage, more about surviving the latest siege. The reality? The only siege peasants typically faced was when Uncle Jeffrey stubbornly refused to leave their ale bench. Let's drop this stat bomb to bust the myth. Most medieval folks never glimpsed a battlefield, unless you count turf wars over who nabbed the last turnip. The average battle was a fiery debate about whose pig trampled whose garden, not a dawn joust with Sir Shoutsalot from the neighboring manor. Actual data suggests pillows got more pounding than towns did. Daily life resembled less a Game of Thrones episode, more a rustic version of The Office. Hard labor, cranky livestock, repetitive chores, and cozy communal living. Yes, you toiled from sunrise to sunset, and sure, trouble brewed if the pig busted loose again. But bloodshed rarely stole the spotlight. So who penned those epic tales of violence? Nobles, mercenary knights, and marching armies. Not your everyday peasant who was too busy keeping shoes on his feet and surviving harvest season. Swords weren't the daily worry. So what was? Let's take a closer look. Continuously fighting battles would seemingly leave little room for leisure, reinforcing the idea that there was no fun in medieval times. Picture medieval life as one endless Monday morning. No coffee, endless chores, and zero snooze buttons in sight. The popular tale? A non-stop slog of plowing, praying, and perishing, about as much fun as a surprise tax audit. Medieval peasants, we're told, worked dawn till dusk, their leisure limited to dodging plagues and swapping potatoes for gossip. But hold up, let's hit pause on that myth. Reality check. Sure, medieval folk worked hard, but they weren't total joyless drones, unless you count the death toll of their dental hygiene. Their calendars overflowed with holy days. Yes, that's where holiday actually comes from. Imagine getting up to a third of your year officially off. That's one day of rest for every 2 days of toil. The medieval work week? Plow, pray, party, repeat. Think modern influencers hit too many festivals? Meet the medieval peasants. Spring fairs, harvest blowouts, saint days, and any excuse for a good knees up or a boar on a spit. Sundays were church mandated downtime, and sometimes kings literally ordered townsfolk to dance just to spice things up. Music, games, and ale kept spirits high, even if crops didn't always cooperate. Now, don't get me wrong, medieval life wasn't exactly a spa retreat. The Black Death could crash the party any day. But amid wandering minstrels and surprise feast days, medieval Europeans often wrung more joy from life than most of us do, scrolling through phones on self care Sundays. So, next time you gripe about Mondays, remember your medieval ancestor was probably nursing a hangover from one saintly shindig or another.